This information is brought to you by Charles Sturt University.
ITC593 week 2 lecture. This week we will talk about classical encryption technique part 1. The other part we'll discuss in week 3, that means next week, as per our study guide or module that is uploaded in your module section of Interact site. We'll go through accordingly. In our first week lecture, we talked about introduction to network security, and we also give some background of network security. We also discussed security threats, security attacks, both active and passive attacks. We also discussed details on security service and mechanisms. This week we will talk about classical encryption technique, as I mentioned in the first slide. We will focus in particular the symmetric crypto system. Symmetric crypto system, actually it is also referred to as conventional encryption or single key encryption. It was the only type of encryption in use prior to the development of public encryption in the 1970s. It remains by far the most widely used of the two types of encryption. All traditional schemes are symmetric or single key or private key encryption algorithms. With a single key, it is used for both encryption and decryption. Since both sender and receiver are equivalent, either can encrypt or decrypt message using that common key. It is most widely used because this symmetric encryption technique is easier and easy to use. Now, I'd like to give you some basic terminology of symmetric crypto system. I'll give you briefly review some terminology which are used throughout the course. Detail of the 5 ingredients of the symmetric shaper model you will find is in your textbook in figure 2.1 Stalling books, textbooks. I think all of you have the books. You will see the plain text, it is original message, and ciphertext is coded message, that means after encryption. And cipher is a technique or algorithm for transforming plain text to ciphertext. Key, that means it is a information used in cipher known only to sender and receiver, no any other person. If it is symmetric, then sender and receiver will the same key. If it is asymmetric, then the key pair will be different. In cipher, that means crypt, it is converting plain text to ciphertext, and decipher or decrypt, recovering ciphertext from plain text. That means opposite of in shaper. And cryptography is the study of encryption principle and methods. And cryptanalysis, that means sometimes we call code breaking. It is a study of principles or rules or methods of deciphering ciphertext without knowing the key. And another terminology is cryptology. It is a field of both cryptography and cryptanalysis. Symmetric cipher model, in this slide you will see a figure. This figure will show the plain text as an input. It passes through the encryption algorithm, and this algorithm is, for example, data encryption and standard is DES. We will discuss later. You can consider this is an encryption algorithm, and this key is used here, secret key or shared key. Since it is symmetric, so sender and receiver use the same key, and after encryption the ciphertext will transmit it to this receiver side, and the receiver will use the same secret key or shared key, and they decrypt the algorithm. That means it is a reverse opposite of encryption algorithm, and finally retrieve the plain text or recover the plain text output. This is the symmetric cipher model. And what's the requirements? Let me give you some idea about requirements of symmetric crypto system. We assume that it is impractical to decrypt a message on the basis of ciphertext plus knowledge of the encryption or decryption algorithm, and do not need to keep the algorithm secret. Rather, we only need to keep the key secret. This feature of symmetric encryption is what makes it feasible for widespread use. It allows easy distribution of sender-receiver and implementations. You can take a closer look at the essential elements of a symmetric encryption scheme. Mathematically, it can be considered a pair of functions with plain text x and ciphertext y, and key is the k. Encryption algorithm we can say ek, and decryption algorithm we consider as a tk. We also assume that encryption is known and it implies a secure channel to distribute the key. Cryptography system can be characterized along these three independent dimensions as mentioned in this slide. First is type of encryption operation used, that is substitution, transposition and product. Second is number of key used, that is single key or private key or two key or public. And number three is when whose plain text is processed, that is block encryption or stream. We'll discuss this block keeper and stream techniques later in this lecture. Okay, what is cryptanalysis? Naturally, objective is to recover the key in use rather than simply to recover the plain text of a single ciphertext. There are two general approaches. First approach is cryptanalytic attacks. Actually, these attacks rely on the nature of the algorithm plus perhaps some knowledge of the general characteristics of the plain text, or even some example plain text ciphertext pairs. And second is a brute force attack. This type of attack try every possible key on a piece of ciphertext until an intelligible translation into plain text is obtained. On an average, half of all possible key must be typed to achieve success. This slide, I will give you some idea of cryptanalytic attacks. Actually, this comes from your textbook, table 2.1. This table actually summarizes the various types of cryptanalytic attacks based on the amount of information known to the cryptanalyst from least to most. The most difficult problem is presented when all that is available is the ciphertext only. In some cases, not even the encryption algorithm is known, but in general, we can assume that the opponent does know the algorithm used for encryption. Then with increasing information have the other attacks. Generally, an encryption algorithm is designed to withstand a known plain text attack. Some other more definitions. So this is two more definitions are worthy of note here. One is unconditional security, another is computational security. An encryption scheme is unconditionally secure if the ciphertext generated by the scheme does not contain enough information to determine uniquely the corresponding plain text, no matter how much ciphertext is available. An encryption scheme is said to be computationally secure if either the cost of breaking the cipher exceeds the value of the encrypted information, or the time required to break the cipher exceeds the useful lifetime of the information. And conditional security would be nice, but the only known such cipher is one-time pad. So one-time pad, this terminology we will discuss later in this lecture. Computational security. It is given a limited computing resources, that is time needed for calculations, is greater than age of universe. The cipher cannot be broken. For all reasonable encryption algorithms, we have to assume computational security, where it either takes too long or is too expensive to bother breaking the cipher. This slide I will give some brute force search. A brute force attack involves trying every possible key until an intelligible translation of the ciphertext into plain text is obtained. On average, half of all possible keys must be tried to achieve success. In your textbook, you can see the table 2.2. Yes, 2.2 shows how much time is required to conduct a brute force attack for various common key size. For example, you can see here DES is 56, AES 128, triple DES is 168, plus general monoalphabetic key cipher, where either a single system or a million parallel systems are used. You can see if you use the key size 168, it will take 5.9 into 10 to the power 30 years. Whereas the key size is 32, it will take 1.15 milliseconds only. If you see the characters, 26 characters key, that means it takes 6.4 into 10 to the power 6 years. Okay, classical substitution ciphers. Okay. In this section and the next, actually, we examine a sampling of what might be called classical encryption techniques. A study of these techniques enables us to illustrate the basic approaches to symmetric encryption used today and the types of cryptanalytic attacks that must be anticipated. The two basic building blocks of all encryption techniques are substitution and transposition. We will examine these in the next two lectures, next two sections, not lectures, in these lectures. Finally, we discuss a system that combines both substitution and transposition. First one is scissor keeper. Sorry for my accent. The scissor cipher. The scissor cipher is a substitution ciphers. This technique forms the first of the fundamental building blocks. The core idea is to replace one basic unit, that means letter or byte, with another. Whilst the early Greek described several substitution ciphers, the first attested use is military affairs of envoys by Julius Caesar, described by him in Gallic Wars. Still call any cipher using a simple letter shift a Caesar cipher, not just those with shift 3. That is a given example. Meet me after the toga party. And if you shift the word by third letter, you will see the ciphertext will be PHSW, PHDIWSU, WKH, WRD, SWU, WB. It is difficult to understand what the next one, but we the me after the toga party. After shifting third letter for every character or letter, you will see the ciphertext. So it is difficult to understand. Caesar cipher again can be defined transformation. For example, there is another example: A to D, B to E, C to F, and something like that. Mathematically, this mathematical description uses modulo, that means clock arithmetics. In this slide, when you reach Z, you go back to A and start again. Mod 26 implies that when you read 26, you use 0. Instead, that is the letter after Z, or 25 plus 1 goes to A or 0. For example, how day? HOWDY is actually H is 7, O is 14, W is 22, D is 3, Y is 24. Encrypted using key F, that is a shift of 5, it would be MTBID. You can do some examples by your own. You can set an examples. For example, cryptography. What would be the, if we consider the cryptography is the plain text, then according to this Caesar cipher, what would be the ciphertext according to this technique? The mathematical equation is P plus K mod 26 or C minus K mod 26. Ciphertext and plain text. Okay. With this Caesar cipher, there are only 26 possible keys, of which only 25 are of any use, since mapping A to A, etc. does not rely on the message. Note this basic rule of cryptanalysis, that means check to ensure the cipher operator has not goofed and sent a plain text message by mistake. Can try each of the key in turn until can recognize the original message. You can see the figure 2.3 from a textbook for example of search. Note that, as mentioned earlier, we do need to be able to recognize when have an original message, that is, it is English or whatever. Usually easy for humans, hard for computers. Although if using say compressed data could be much harder. For example, there is an example GCUA VQ DTGCM. When Brock gives easy to break with the shift of T key C. Try to break. This is monoalphabetic cipher. It is rather than just shifting the alphabet. It could shuffle the letters arbitrarily. With only 25 possible keys, the Caesar cipher is far from secure. A dramatic increase in the key space can be achieved by allowing an arbitrary substitution, where the translation alphabet can be any permutation of the 26 alphabetic characters. You can see an example in this slide. The plain text A, B, C, D, E, F up to Z, and the corresponding cipher is D, D, K, V, Q, F, etc. This is an example of translation alphabet and an encrypted message using it. For example, this is another plain text is IFWE and corresponding ciphertext. Again, note that even given the very large number of keys being 10 orders of magnitude greater than the key space of encryption standards, the monoalphabetic substitution The monoalphabetic substitution cipher is not secure because it does not sufficiently obscure the underlying language characteristics. This is one of the problem of monoalphabetic cipher techniques. Language redundancy and cryptanalysis. As you know that human language are redundant. Human language are redundant. As the example shows, we don't actually need all the letters in order to understand written English text. Here vowels were removed, but they are not the only redundancy that is written. Here is okay. The letters, there is an example TH, LR, DSM, SMP, something like this. Letters are not equally commonly used. Are usually familiar with body conversations, can hear one person speaking out of many. Again, because of redundancy in oral language also. This redundancy is also the reason we can compress text files. The computer can drive a more compact encoding without losing any information. Basic idea is to count the relative frequencies of letters and know the resulting pattern. Here you will see a figure that all human languages have varying letter frequencies. Though the number of letters and their frequencies varies. These figures you will find in your textbook 2.5. This figure actually shows English letter frequencies according to the research of Savory and Piparczyk. The paper is Cryptography and Introduction to Computer Security. And this is the outcome of the research. You will see some letters, the minimum frequency, some letters is maximum frequency, like E, like T, like A, relative frequency. The simplicity and strength of the monoalphabetic substitution cipher meant it dominated cryptographic use for the first millennium. It was broken by Arabic scientists. The earliest known description is Abu al-Kindi's, a manuscript on deciphering cryptographic messages. It is published in the 19th century but only rediscovered in 1987 in Istanbul. But other later works also attest to their knowledge of this field. Monoalphabetic ciphers are easy to break because they reflect the frequency data of the original alphabet. The cryptanalysis looks for a mapping between the observed pattern in the ciphertext and the known source language letter frequencies. If English, look for peaks at AE, I triple, no pair, RS triple, and though as JK, etc. Peaks and thoughts. Monoalphabetic must identify each other. You can see an example of cryptanalysis. This illustrates the process with this example from the text of your textbook in section 2.2. You can go and have a look at section 2.2. The best known multiple letter encryption cipher is Playfair cipher, which threads diagram in the plain text as single units and translate these units into ciphertext diagrams. The Playfair algorithm is based on the use of 5 multiply 5 matrix of letters, and this 5 multiply 5 matrix of letters constructed using a keyword. The rules of filling in these 5 multiply 5 matrix are L to R, top to bottom. First with keyword after duplicate letters have been removed, and then with the remaining letters with I/J used as a single letter. This example comes from a book is called, Dorothy Sayers' book, Have His Courage. And you can see the keyword monarchy, MONARCHY, BDEFGIJKLM, etc. The plain text is encrypted 2 letters at a time according to the rules as shown. Note, it is to be noticed that how you wrap from right side back to left or from bottom back to top. Number 1, if a pair is prepared repeated letter, insert a filler like X, that is balloon, encrypt as BALLOON, something like that, balloon. If both letters fall in the same row, replace each with letter to right. That means wrapping back to start from N, that is AR, encrypt as RM. If both letters fall in the same column, replace each with the letter below it, that is again wrapping to top bottom, top from bottom. That is MU encrypts to the CM. This is just some techniques. Otherwise, each letter is replaced by one in its row in the column of the other letter of the pair. That is, he says encrypt to BP and BA to IM as desired. Decrypting of course works exactly in reverse. You can see this by working the example pair shown backwards. Something you can use the backwards. The Playfair cipher is a great advance over simple monoalphabetic cipher, since there are 26 into 26 676 diagrams versus 26 letters. So that identification of individual diagrams is more difficult. Also, the relative frequencies of individual letters exhibit a much greater range than that of diagrams, making frequency analysis much more difficult. The Playfair cipher was for a long time considered unbreakable. It was used as the standard field system by the British Army in World War I and still enjoyed considerable use by the other armies and other allied forces during World War II. Despite this level of confidence in its security, the Playfair cipher is relatively easy to break because it still leaves much of the structure of the plaintext language intact. One approach to reducing the spikiness of natural language text is used to the Playfair cipher, which encrypt more than one letter at once. We now consider the other alternative, that means using multiple cipher alphabets in turn. This gives the attacker more work, since many alphabets need to be guessed, and because the frequency distribution is more complex, since the same plaintext letter could be replaced by several ciphertext letters, depending on which alphabet is used. The general name for this approach is a polyalphabetic substitution cipher. All these techniques have the following features in common, that is, a set of related monoalphabetic substitution rules is used. Number 2, a key determines which particular rule is chosen for a given transformation. Okay, visionary cipher. This is the best known and one of the simplest such algorithms is referred to as the visionary cipher, where the set of related monoalphabetic substitution rules consist of the 26 Caesar ciphers with shifts of 0 through 25. Each cipher is denoted by a key letter, which is the ciphertext letter that substitutes for the plaintext letter A, and which are each used in trans, as shown the next. You'll see this figure, the key is multiple letters long, K2, K1, K2, KD. Up to ith letter specifies ith alphabet to use. There is an example of visionary cipher. This example is discussed. It is actually a simple example. You will find this example from your text section 2.2. So I request to go to the textbook and see the details of this example. The key is this, and plain text is this, and corresponding ciphertext is this. Some simple aids. There are simple aids can assist with encryption or decryption. Actually, implementing polyalphabetic cipher by hand can be very tedious. Various aids were devised to assist the process. The send slide was popularized and named by Zenkarkovs, who published a famous early text. The name is La Cryptographique Militaire in 1983. He actually named the slide after the French National Military Academy, where the methods were taught. He also noted that any slide can be expanded into a tableau or bent round into a ciphertext. The visionary tableau is given in the figure, mixed figure I think. No. You will find the figure in your textbook. 2.3 is a complete set of forward shifted alphabet mappings. Actually, the visionary and related polyalphabetic cipher still do not completely obscure and underlying language characteristics. The key to breaking them was to identify the number of translation alphabets and then attack each separately. Okay, Kaspersky method. For some centuries, the visionary cipher was La Serfrique. It's very difficult to read. The unbreakable keeper. It's called unbreakable cipher. As a result of challenge, it was broken by Charles Babbage, that is the inventor of the computer, in 1854, but kept secret, possibly because of the Crimean War. Not for the first time governments have kept advantages of silver, etc. It's not sure. That could be actually. The method was independently reinvented by a Persian, Friedrich Kaspersky, who published the attack named after him in 1863. However, lack of major advances meant that various polyalphabetic substitution ciphers were used into the 20th century. One very famous incident was the breaking of the Zimmermann telegram in World War I, which resulted in the US entering the war. In general, the approach is to find a number of duplicated sequences, collect all their distance apart, look for common factors, remembering that some will be random flux and need to be discarded. Now have a series of monoalphabetic cipher, each with original language letter frequency characteristics, can attack this in turn to break the cipher. Auto key cipher. This is another technique. Ideally, want a key as long as the message. Actually, visionary proposed this auto key cipher, taking the monoalphabetic idea to the extreme, wants as many different translation alphabet as letters in the message being sent. One way to doing this with a smallest key is to use the auto key cipher. The example uses the keyword deceptive and blah blah blah. Prefixed to as much as of the message is where discover. It's up to this. You can see in the slide the plain text as is needed. When deciphering, recover that first 9 letters using the keyword deceptive. Then instead of repeating the keyword, start using the recovered letters from the message. Where a disk. You see the first some alphabets from the plain text. As recover more letters, have more of key to recover letters. The problem is that the same language characteristics are used by the key as the message. That is, a key E, the letter alphabet E, will be used more often than alphabet T, etc. Hence, an E encrypted with a key of alphabet E occurs with probability, for example, 0.1663, about twice as often as a alphabet T encrypted with the key of alphabet T. Have to use a larger frequency table, but it exists given sufficient ciphertext. This can be broken. Okay, as I mentioned earlier that we will discuss this one. So this is called one-time pad. The one-time pad is an evolution of the Verman cipher, which was invented by Gilbert Verman in 1918 and used a long tape of random letters to encrypt the message. An early Signal Corporation officer, his name is Joseph Maborgi. Actually, he proposed an improvement using a random key that was truly as long as message, with no repetitions, which thus totally obscures the original message. It produces random output that bears no statistical relationship to the plain text, because the ciphertext contains no information whatsoever about the plain text. There is simply no way to break the code, because since any plain text can be mapped to any ciphertext given some key. The one-time pad offers complete security, but in practice has no fundamental difficulties. That is number one. There is the practical problem of making large quantities of random keys. Number two, and the problem of key distribution and production, where for every message to be sent, a key of equal length is needed by both sender and receiver. Because of these difficulties, the one-time pad is of limited utility. And is useful primarily for low bandwidth channels requiring very high security. Transposition ciphers. All the techniques mentioned we mentioned is examined so far involve the substitution of the ciphertext symbol for a plain text symbol. A very different kind of mapping is achieved by performing some sort of permutation on the plain text letters. This technique is referred to as a transposition cipher, and from the second basic building block of ciphers. The core idea is to rearrange the other order of basic units, that means it could be letters, bytes or bits, without altering their actual values. Another is called a rail fence cipher. The simplest such cipher is this cipher is as I mentioned, rail fence cipher. This technique, in which the plain text is written down as a sequence of diagonals and then read off as a sequence of rows. The example message is here mentions meet me after the toga party. With a rail fence of depth 2, the given ciphertext would be something like this mentioned here. This sort of things would be trivial to cryptanalyze. Another is row transposition cipher. As I mentioned earlier in the previous slide, that is a pure transposition. That means previous slide, and okay, this one is, what's the previous slide? Sorry, I can go previous slide. Rail fence ciphers, actually. Now, on the next slide, it comes row transposition cipher. Okay, the examples, okay, previous one, okay. This one, the more complex transposition cipher is to write the message in a rectangle, row by row, and read the message of shuffling the other of the columns in each row. A poor transposition cipher is easily recognized because it has the same letter frequencies as the original plain text. For the type of columnar transposition just shown, cryptanalysis is fairly straightforward and involves laying out the ciphertext in a matrix and playing around with column positions. The diagram and trigram frequency tables could be useful. So I am talking this row transposition cipher. Then I will go next one. You will see there is a example here. The next one is product cipher. Okay, this you have seen that cipher based on just substitution or transposition are not secure and can be attacked because they don't sufficiently obscure the underlying language structure. So consider using several ciphers in succession to make harder. A substitution followed by transposition is known as product cipher and makes a new much more secure cipher and forms the base of modern ciphers. The next major advance in ciphers required use of mechanical cipher machines which enable to use of complex varying substitutions. A rotor machine consists of a set of independently rotating cylinders through which electrical pulse can flow. Each cylinder has 26 input pins and 26 output pins with internal wiring that connects each input pin to a unique output pin. If we associate its input and output pin with a letter of the alphabet, then a single cylinder defines a monoalphabetic substitution. After each input key is depressed, the cylinder rotates one position so that the internal connections are shifted accordingly. The power of the rotor machine is in the use of multiple cylinders in which the input pins of one cylinder are connected to the input pins of the next, and with the cylinders rotating like a odometer, leading to a very large number of substitution alphabets being used. For example, with 3 cylinders have 26 to the power 3 is equivalent 1756576 alphabets used. They were extensively used in Second World War, and the history of their use and analysis is one of the great stories from Second World War. This is the rotor machine. This photo actually an Allied H-Lin machine was taken by Lottie Brown at ITC593 in Norway. Please note that when for scale and rotating shaper wheels near the front. This machine, you can see this figure comes from the textbook as well. Okay. Stenography. Stenography is an alternative to encryption which hides the very existence of a message by some means. There are a large number of techniques for doing this. Stenography has a number of drawbacks when compared to encryption. It requires a lot of overhead to hide a relatively few bits of information. Also, once the system is discovered, it becomes virtually worthless. Although a message can be first encrypted and then hidden using stenography. Okay, this is the summary what we have discussed in this week's lectures. These are the summary. We have considered classical cipher techniques and terminology. We also discussed monoalphabetic substitution cipher, cryptanalysis using letter frequencies, Playfair cipher, polyalphabetic cipher, transposition cipher, product cipher, rotor machine, and finally we discussed stenography. So please go to the chapter 2. This lecture is based on your textbook chapter 2. Please go to the chapter 2 and you will find details. And if you find anything difficulties, come to the forum or send an email if you have particular problem and share with your views with others. And also follow the weekly task activities. I also uploaded in the research section. You will find week 2 activities. Please go through. Okay, that's it. This week 2. I will come back to you week 3 with classical encryption. Actually, week 3 we will discuss the advanced encryption technique. Okay, thank you. Have a good day.